Now we will proceed with this second round of Q&A. If you have like any questions, please type them on the chat box or the comment box if you're on YouTube. At this point, I'd like to acknowledge some of the other members of the audience who actually sent in their questions. Dr. Elmer Mojica's question was about the role of culture, in the underrepresentation of Filipinos in STEM. His experience in New York with parents who wanted their children to be there in nursing or med school. Actually, I think Fritzi actually commented on this issue earlier. And also, I think there's still issues about, the East versus the West Coast, the differences that we may go back to later, or maybe at some points in the future. There's a question from Fritzi. Dr. Tigno, are there policies being developed to support women? Perhaps mini grants for childcare or a different timeline to account for COVID right now?
Yes, in fact, as part of the project of my office currently, this year we had what we call the continuity supplements. So that means if you are a K awardee and you have experienced childbirth or some critical life event, then you can ask for an extension of your grant in the form of a small grant. I think it's $50,000 that you can apply for from the NIH, so that say you had a baby and for the next 3 months, nobody's going to feed your cells in the lab, something like that. Or your animals have to be taken care of. You can hire a technician with a little amount of money that is given to you so that somebody else can take over these functions while you are still recuperating. And then there is also the continuity supplements for R01 awardees, again, for critical life events, not including COVID, because this was thought of even before COVID came, that for instances of adoption of a child or childbirth, then you can apply for these supplements. But of course, those are all competitive. And because of the COVID pandemic, I think there is what is being said at the NIH is we should try to be as flexible as possible. So even submission of grant applications, I think, have been extended. And so like I used to have a lot of R25 training grants. They couldn't recruit for summer because nobody was coming in. The COVID was there. Nobody could travel. There was lockdown. I think there is an automatic, consider the next year as the year that you lost this year. So if you look at the NIH website under the Office of Extramural Research, you can see all of the new flexibilities that NIH has done in order to accommodate COVID. But unfortunately, I think the biggest thing that is lacking now is for seed money for women. Like if you did not have an existing K or an R award, but you are still struggling to put up your lab, most likely you're a woman at that, there is no seed money for you to restart your project once this pandemic is over. So for me, that is one of the most important things that need to be there. Now, childcare, that has always been, one of the things that's really essential. And even for the NIH community, I don't think there is sufficient childcare to accommodate the needs of the women scientists, even on campus, or the intramural researchers.
May I add something to that, Sayanga?
Sure. Sure.
So at the National Science Foundation, we have a program that is called Advance, and it's basically for organizational change for gender equity in the academe. And the idea is actually to transform the institution and to make it more friendly to or make the campus climate for women in a much better way than what they have now, because most of these things that happen are actually dependent on how the institution look at their policies, hiring, um, and promotion and all these things really is very much something that has to change. And one of the things that we've been doing with NIH is to have a joint activity so that
Yeah, we are co-sponsoring that sea change, by the way.
yes,
We paid
and
$600,000, I think, for
basically what that
collaboration.
sea change is doing is to just have institutions really look deeply into their policies in terms of how they uh, make equitable or make it equal for men and women to be able to rise to the academic ladder.
Yes, and so I'm not supposed to say this because it's not out on the streets yet, but one of the recommendations and one of the things that's coming up will be a price for institutions that have shown gender equity or have shown some strategies by way to achieve that. And again, as part of the NASEM recommendations was that maybe federal agencies should require universities to report, accountability of the university itself to say how much or what proportion of their faculty are women, so accountability on the part of the institution. And maybe that should be part of, because like at the NIH, we have environment. You have to describe your environment to show what kind of university you are. Maybe that should be a scorable, section in the grant application. And also the question of sexual harassment. So this is being dealt with very conscientiously by the NIH, and there may be other opportunities coming down the pike for victims of sexual harassment. Like if your mentor harassed you, you are tied up to his grant. What do you do next if you're a doctorate student? And this is a very touchy issue because universities and the victim themselves, because of privacy issues, it is very difficult to approach that subject.
Dr. Tigno and Dr. Tupas, I have one question for each of you. Dr. Tigno from Dr. Ana Sarkinia, do you think the lack of mentors and sponsors for women of color affect their rise up the ranks?
Of course, and that is again one of the things that is recommended is, so we have a national mentoring network, for diverse individuals, so that you can, apart from your scientific mentor, you can have a sort of a coach mentor who can you can identify with, who can show you what to do. But in addition to that, it is being recommended that in order for women to be able to rise up to the senior ranks, they should have a sort of a sponsor, could be a male or a female, highlighting them or, highlighting their careers, highlighting their accomplishments, etc., and probably endorsing them to the rest of the university. So a lot of this is institution-based, and it's not just the federal government which has the responsibility to respond to this, but also the institutions in how they are going to diversify their workplace, not just for racial and ethnic groups, but also for the representation of women.
Dr. Tupas, a question from Dr. Elmer Mojica. In my experience in applying to NSF scholarship grants like STEM, I cannot include PhilAMS as URM unless I am in California. It is so hard that the only URM here are Hispanics, African-American, and Native Americans. What can we do as PI if we want to apply for grants to support PhilAMS students?
So that's a very good question. And one of the things that we always say is that although NSF has the largest budget for STEM education, a lot of that budget goes to research. However, when it comes to underrepresented groups, for as long as they don't have a program like an APAMS in NSF, that will be something that will be difficult to say you can support Phil-AMS in your program. And even though Phil-AMS are considered underrepresented in California, unless an agency that has a program does not consider them underrepresented, you cannot even include them in that category. Unfortunately for NSF, Asian Americans, and as I said, because they're being aggregated, are not considered underrepresented in STEM. Filipino Americans may be underrepresented, and they may have some kind of support depending on the institution. If the institution already support these groups, then they can appeal and say, hey, this is really a program that has a lot of support, or programs that already geared towards supporting Phil-Am in the institution. And we'd like to include them in our program for as long as you can justify that it may work. But again, as I said, if the program for those types of underrepresented groups are not supported in that agency, it's very hard to convince them that they should also be funded. At this point, I feel like there's nothing much we could do but wait until they really realize, and that we need to have some kind of advocacy group the same way that the Hispanic serving institutions that was established in NSF was due to the persistence of the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. And they also have someone in Congress who could back them. Unfortunately, we don't have someone in Congress who's a Phil-Am who would say, yes, we are underrepresented. It has to come from different groups, institutions of higher education, Congress, and also advocacy groups. Those are the main groups that can help you with. And
Yeah.
Leah said PAASE
Yeah.
can be the advocacy group.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So this is actually one of our agenda. Uh, the other thing I wanted to say, Elmer, is that, for the NIH, again, we have a lot of diversity grants, especially in training. And like the diversity supplements are plenty of them. And the trick is for the institution that is applying to say that Filipinos are underrepresented in their institution. And if they submit that and the ABO signs, then NIH does not question, say we would like to train so-and-so because in our institution, Filipinos are underrepresented. And that will go.
And I would say that NIH is more flexible when it comes to that than NSF, because since I was in Hawaii for 10 years, many of the students are Filipino-Americans. And when we put out grants to NIH, we say, well, Filipino-Americans here are considered underrepresented. We have programs for Filipino-Americans and so on and so forth. So they would allow that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, we're almost at the end of our 2.5 hours. But then I'd like to ask this a question from Maria Malaya Baldovino. I am teaching science in College of Engineering in one of the state university here in Laguna. I found out that students in that college experience difficulty when it comes to major subjects. Now I found out other issues why some of them are not motivated to pursue their careers. I believe those reasons conveyed in the symposium based on your researches, lack of support system and visibility in other parts of the globe are factors to be considered. So this is more of a comment than a question. So we are at the end of our 2.5 hours of presentations and discussion, and this has been really a very rich and illuminating session. I'd like to thank all of you who spent time to listen and discuss with us. I'd like to thank especially our panel members, Dr. Fritzi Demata, Dr. Christel Cobian, Dr. Xavier Hernandez, Dr. Germelina Tupas, and Dr. Senya Tigno. Of course, I'd like to thank PAASE for this opportunity to host this session. And I'd like to just repeat what Dr. Leah Tolosa Croucher wrote on the chat box, that PAASE can be the advocacy group. This is exactly why we held this session, because we want to start, moving the needle and have, more Filipinos and Filipino-Americans reaching, the heights of success in STEM, in health careers, and of course, bringing with us, the populations of Filipino-Americans from all over the United States, of course, from the Philippines as well. So thank you very much, and mabuhay tayong lahat. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat.
Good night.
Good night po. Salamat po.